Welcome everyone to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, where we seek to give you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life by pulling apart the news topics of the day and looking at the spiritual principles at play to see how you can better navigate your own spiritual journey. My name is Andy, Operations Manager here at IKYA Center. Please, down below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and share this episode already now because people can join live the entire time and write in their questions and comments. And IKYA Live is a unique news program in that it is about a discussion, a conversation about the day's news. So please do write in your comments and questions in the chat here, and we'll feed them to IKYA. And we also have a live studio audience who will be engaging as well. So be sure to jump on social media, follow us at IKYA.official, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And while you're there, please again share the episodes so that as many people as possible can join in for a conversation tonight about a really interesting topic. You know, there's a lot of talk in the news about the woke generation and a lot of kind of whiny, cryy, indulged kids all over, especially the Western world. But the fact is that those kids have grown up that way because of the way we've raised them and the way parents have raised kids for some generations now. So it's not something that has just popped up, and it's not anybody's particular fault, but it's a really fascinating conversation to have because there's so many spiritual principles at play, and the future of our species in a way is at stake. So we hope to have a lively, engaging conversation tonight. Please do bring your questions and your perspective to bear. This is really about how to parent and guide the future generations. But we'll start at the more kind of fun and painful point of IKYA, what the hell is going on with young people today?
I think we need to have two perspectives at the same time here. One is the cultural one, right? What's going on in our civilization and how these things have developed. And then you have the spiritual aspect. And if we start with the cultural one, remember since the Second World War, life has gradually become better. And that's a terrible thing because we don't have genetics to cope with a good life. Remember, throughout evolution, life has been extremely tough, and only the strongest and toughest survived. Right? So we are hardwired to fight, to climb, to achieve things. And we have a lot of different programs telling us that there are big problems everywhere. Right? We need to be aware of all the dangers. Because when we look back at human evolution, you could be killed any moment and everything could kill you. Illnesses and friends and family and, everyone. And you didn't have enough food. And most people died when they were kids. And the few who grew up, they also died when they were young. So we are fighters. So one of the things that's fascinating is when we live a good life, we become destructive. Most of us do. And the reason is that we are absolutely convinced that there have to be problems, right? Something inside of us will keep telling us that there is danger here. Things are not right. And that means that we will be looking for something to justify that feeling, right? I've explained this that when you know that there is a dangerous animal lurking in the jungle, you will not rest until you're able to pinpoint that dangerous animal because then you can have peace. So we're looking for that, all of us. And it means that we take very small problems and make them really big, because we have genetic programs telling us that they're big problems, they're big dangers. So we take very, very small problems and we blow them up. They become really important. And the more comfortable we are, the more we have to blow up insignificant problems until they resemble the size of a mammoth or a lion or whatever could kill us. So it also means that our feelings become more important, right? And we're looking for something to criticize, something to be wrong. And I've said this many times before, when we are negative, that's connected to survival. Because good things don't kill us, right? What can kill us if we are not aware of the dangers? So being negative and to criticize is looked upon as being smart. Being positive, then you're stupid because you could die. Right? So when we have the combination of looking for the dangers and we're blowing up small things, and we become more negative because we have to criticize everything in order to be smart. There are so many different programmings, but it's difficult to navigate, right? And on top of that, what's happening now is that it's more and more difficult to become a winner. Inside of us, rule number one, or one of the rules of evolution, is that we have to win. We're supposed to fight to win, right? In the old days, you could be the best in your group of 10 people, right? Or 20 people. Over time, you could be the best in your village. Right now, whatever you do, you have to be the best in the world. You're competing with 8 billion people. And it means that the mountains we're trying to climb are getting bigger and bigger. And it means that most of us are losers. Right? In so many areas of life, we are all losers because the mountains keep growing. It's very difficult for anyone today to feel like a winner. And this is also part of our depression, why we're so, discontent with our lives. Although for most humans, life has never been better, but we feel sad and we feel miserable and we feel worthless and all of that, also because we are losers. Because we have decided that the mountains are so high that only the very few can reach the top. And for us to feel good, we need the experience of having climbed to the top of some mountain. It doesn't matter what it is. We'll get back to that. But there are so many mechanisms kind of being part of this whole thing. And we'll talk more about that later. It's also a fact that we are in a very kind of big change on the planet. The consciousness is changing. And of course, it's number one, because it's necessary for this life form. Otherwise, it will not survive, but it's also a natural change. And more individuals are incarnating with a different default setting in themselves. Many experience that the kids who are incarnating today, not all of them, but a lot of them are more advanced, right? They are different, and they are. They incarnate from other planets, they're incarnating from other life forms to this planet. And they lack the kind of competence in understanding how the human life form operates, and they get completely surprised, especially when it comes to the emotional complex of the human life form, because that is quite unique for this life form. So that also plays in that you have very strong individuals with a sense of competence that they know they incarnate as part of changing the world and lifting everything, and then they enter this human body, and the emotional body completely shocks them. And then they get filled with all these feelings and emotions, and they lose track of what they're really doing and why they're here. I talk to a lot of these types of people, young people, also older actually, but they are all struggling being in the human life form and understanding how does this thing even work. It doesn't make sense. They're used to being kind of logical, being on top of things, and then all of a sudden it just feels messy. So I just say, welcome to this planet. It takes time to grow into this life form and also utilize it. And remember, if you want to be part of lifting the planet, you have to master being human first. So for many of these young people, they're just struggling because we are in this melting pot of so many different things happening at the same time. I think it's just a lot of fun, and it also shakes up our civilization. But did we have any questions?
We do have a question from the audience already.
I was thinking about the fact that from my perspective, I could observe a lot of kids today also being confused because everything is about everything being outside of them. And the only reference point they have is something being outside of them, because we are so disconnected right now, and everything is telling us to choose something outside of us. How we look and just choosing that perspective. And inside, you know that this can't be right. And a lot of frustration and I guess pain comes from the fact that nothing is really about the inside, who you really are, what you represent, and that connection.
Right. Let me just stop you because this is fun. Now, this is something that has backfired. Remember that for generations now, we've been telling kids, you can be whatever you want to, right? Do just whatever. And we'll just love you no matter what because you're the best, right? You're the best in the world. And when you bring up kids and they believe that they're all that, they should be seen, right? They should be supported. They should be nurtured. They should be the center of the universe. And they're absolutely the best at everything, right? And they demand that other people see that they're best at everything, right? That will then translate into a state of entitlement where you then get confused. So when you meet the real world, nobody gives a fuck. All of a sudden, where's all the attention? Like, I'm the best. I'm very valuable. I demand to be seen. So then you try to figure out, because humans are extremely hierarchical, you need to climb to the top. And how do you do that? You then have to be seen, which is today being very popular, right? It's interesting that the combination of social media and having had now a few generations where kids increasingly have been told they're just wonderful. They are winners because they exist. Then social media becomes extremely addictive, and all these behaviors like becoming someone through buying the right brands, right? As I say, it's everything is outside of you because you get desperate. You're not seen for who you are because you have no idea what that is. You're just used to being seen. When you're told that you're a winner, you're the best, and you really haven't achieved anything, it fucks with our genetic makeup. Because remember that throughout evolution, we have been specializing each individual. To live in a group, you need to have a function. You need to have value, which means that you need to have a skill or several, and you need to practice. You need to become the best. Then it's measurable. It's visible. Everyone can see, yeah, you're the best hunter. You're the best gatherer. You're the best at taking care of the kids. You can become best at something. So inside of us, we're actually hardwired to be seen based on merits, based on us doing something that contributes to our group, that can, make a difference. And now we just want to be seen, right? Because we have disconnected the being seen from achieving something, right? Because we just love you no matter what. So although parents have wanted their kids to feel loved no matter what, they also told them that it doesn't matter what you do. So many adults today feel I should be seen just for me. And when that's not happening, they get desperate because they build their identity on other people seeing them. They do not build their identity on achieving something. Throughout the whole human evolution, our identity has been defined by what we do, how we contribute, because that's who we are. You are the hunter, you are the warrior. And now I'm just me, right? So, and then when we told kids that, whatever, we're taking away their ability to prove themselves, because being a winner, being seen, means that you have achieved something for real that is productive to society. And now it's just attention, because we're told our kids that's what it's about. So when they don't necessarily have the skill set to do something productive, so they may deserve to be seen, they just figure out like whatever. They become addicted to attention. Because, when you achieve something, other people will see you. They will appreciate you. You will feel good because that's how we are programmed, right? So when we take that away and we say, like, just do whatever you want, and you end up doing things that nobody really cares about, that are not really contributing to society, but you demand to be seen. It's very difficult to navigate, right? But this is what we have created. And then, because you want to be seen, you have to reach for something outside of you. Because you're supposed to achieve something, but now it's just achieving something is something that makes you popular. It's not really an achievement, right? So this is what's going on. And we need to teach our kids to achieve things. And we need also to help them kind of score points. They have to win. They have to understand their kind of rules of the game. Because when we achieve something great, something happens in us. We know that we're productive. We know that we are valuable. And we all have it in us because, as I said, like in a group, that's when, like small groups, that's when specialization began happening for humans a very long time ago. Everybody would find their job. Everybody would find their skill. So it means we can all do that. But kids need to be told that I love you unconditionally, but I will also see you based on your achievements. Right? You have to become someone for the world to recognize you, because the world will not recognize you just for existing. The world will recognize you when you contribute in any significant way, right? And this is what we need to start telling our kids again.
Our colleague here, IKYA, he wonders how much this trend or a few generations here has been about like kind of parents needing their own kids' confirmation and like needing to be friends with their kids, if that makes sense. Like going out of the parental role and like, yeah, just wanting be buddies with their kids.
This goes back to what I've been talking about. We have emphasized being liked and likability as something important. If you achieve something great, it's not about being liked. It's about achieving something great. And it's the same thing. When you become addicted to being seen, you want your kids to see you too, and to confirm you that you're a nice and wonderful person. Not for you to be a great parent, but for them to tell you that they like you. It's part of the same thing. Parents have to become parents again. They have to stop being friends with their kids and be leaders. Set the examples. Teach them how to grow a positive ambition, set direction, work hard, and become someone. Becoming someone is using your talents and skills and getting to know yourself through your life's journey. Hopefully, how you experience yourself as an adult is very different from when you were a kid. You still have the same talents, but you develop yourself. You grow, you become someone, right? And it's a parent's job to assist their kids in setting direction and setting sail and making something out of this lifetime, instead of believing that many people do today, that life owes them, right? This is part of the problem with entitlement, is many young people feel that, you know, they demand this, they demand that, and they whine and scream and yell because how dare you not giving me everything I want? Well, life is about the opposite. It's about learning how to give, how to contribute, how to become someone. And you're not that to start with. I've talked a lot about how human relationships are basically transactional in the way that you have to bring something of value to others. It's not for other people to see you as being valuable for who you are. Value is something that other people kind of place on you in a way. They say that you're valuable because you contribute value. It's up to you to figure out what that is, but there is an element of transaction in all relationships. And it's because humans have always depended on each other to survive. It's been collaboration, it's been hierarchy, it's been competition. And it means that we mean something to each other and we include other people in our survival strategies. So we need to understand, when building our survival team, who can I rely on? Who have the specialized skills that I need? Because I'm good at this, other people are good at that. How can I kind of build my survival team? So it's always about adding value.
So our colleague again, Aki, he adds to the conversation that he's heard women talk about that men who don't say no, they have no respect for them. And we see the same trend with kids, that they don't respect us when we don't say no. And he's also noticed this interesting trend that where kids seem, especially in our generation and younger, they insist on mom and dad or other adults watching them when they play. And it's as though playing no longer has any function by itself unless they're being observed and sort of seen.
Yeah, I think there's always been an element of that. Remember that playing is about acquiring and developing life skills. So you need adults to kind of see you and to evaluate, are you doing it right? Playing throughout evolution has been mimicking what the adults are doing, right? That's always been, like, until recently, kids used to, you know, play nurse, cowboy, whatever, right? It was mimicking what the adults are doing. And they're trying to figure out how to educate themselves to become humans. So there's always been an element of when kids play that they want adults to see them and praise them, because in the old days, playing was your education. Think of, you know, in the real old days, you would watch your dad, for instance, go fishing, right? And then you would play that you were fishing. And you did that for a while, and then you watched and you figured things out, and then at some point he would take you fishing and he would teach you how to do it. So playing had that function of educating you and emulating to the point where you became ready to learn for real. So it's always been part of kind of a human education. But back to how people today, they want attention, they want to be seen. And it's because we have created a culture where that has become real important. Instead of becoming someone that contributes value for real, we want to be appreciated. And it will change. This is a very strange phase in human history, and we will grow past this. But this current generation, they have very unrealistic expectations. And as parents, we have to change direction, because we can see with this current generation that a lot of it is working, but a lot of it is also not working. And I think it's important that we try to adjust our course and become clearer in how we guide our kids. They're not necessarily smarter, right? When kids are never told no, and when they're told, oh, you're so wise, you're so wonderful, a kid will grow up believing that they already know. I know better, I'm smarter than you, and let's face it, they're not. And you see it today also in universities where kids believe that they understand things better than the professors, and they are always right, and it's not healthy. It does not necessarily bring things forward, because remember that you are here spiritually to learn about things you don't understand. You're here to study your own karma, which means you're always wrong. And understanding that what I know is not sufficient, I got more to learn. That is also how we grow spiritually. Right? So assuming that I'm always right, I already know, I got better values, like all of that is not productive. Because we are all here to face our own karma. We will all be confronted with a new potential, a new step. And fighting it is not smart. What we'll learn over time when we're in spiritual practices is kind of entering a kind of default state. Whenever something happens, we just like, okay, what do I need to change in myself? It's part of being young, believing that you know everything and then the world should change according to your beliefs. Over time, most people hopefully grow into the same or understand that the only change that is true is the change we do to ourselves. The only true way to change the world is by changing ourselves, because then we see the world differently. And at some point, we get it. But it's also part of the genetic kind of game. As a young person, you're supposed to believe in yourself. And it makes you throw yourself into the competition that is evolution, right? You're supposed to believe that I got what it takes to reproduce. I'm a winner. So you will believe that you're a winner, and you will go out there and fight. And evolution will show who was right. So that is part of being young, right? So it's not that young people should not believe in themselves and believe that they're better than everybody else, because they're supposed to. But they also need to, in order to change the world, they also need to want to change themselves. And how we have been raising our kids for the last few generations has resulted in this weird space where many young people seriously believe that they got nothing to learn, right? And when we look at that, we can say as parents, okay, maybe we need to make some adjustments here.
We have a question from Sara in the audience.
Yeah, I was also thinking about if you could share some perspectives of the difference in the age gap and the different personalities and qualities of the different ages and generations, because earlier you can see like when rock and roll came and Elvis came and all the parents and then the segregation of the black and white, and then suddenly everything was intertwined and it was, oh my goodness, the young generation is crazy. But the feeling that I have is that it's actually accelerating. And is that because of what you mentioned in the beginning of the different type of consciousness that is incarnating as well? And also, isn't it really a good idea for us older people to stay wise but also keep a bit up to speed with the younger people?
Absolutely. Now, what you mention is quite interesting and important. Understanding that when you incarnate, you also incarnate in a specific generation, when you incarnate as a human on this planet, to take part in that wave. Each generation is like a space, right? And you follow a journey, a collective journey, and each collective journey is different. And what we've had in the West, especially since the Second World War, has been an enormous focus on the individual. That's been beneficial for people to figure out who they are, what they want, and then instead of using their talents, it became about satisfying their needs. And that's a part of being an individual that's not very smart, because then we do the opposite of seeking greatness. We just feel stuff and then I want something to fill my needs, right? So we kind of moved in that direction, but the first generations were about discovering the individual and going through different stages of individual responsibility, exploration, freedom, all of that. And also in the 80s, where it also became quite decadent. And now, faced with the potential destruction of the planet, we know that we need to seek also global and collective solutions. And we're not there yet, right? Many young people are, which can be very difficult for the older generation to understand because they are so addicted to my freedom, my needs. I want things to be this way. And many young people, they belong to a generation where that space is different. They understand that we can exist together. I don't need to own things, right? They're more comfortable with sharing, right? And less focus on owning stuff, more focus on connectedness and togetherness and sharing. And that is a shocking development for many people. But it comes with a higher level of consciousness and also understanding that, we need different solutions, which means that often the interest of the collective will have to go before the interest of the individual, right? Because when the behavior of the individual is a threat to the survival of the collective human or the whole planet, that needs to be modified. Then we need to restrict the individual freedom in order to have collective decisions that are sustainable and healing. And young people are moving in that direction. And it's not communism, it's none of those things. It's simply that also the human consciousness biologically is changing due to the fact that we're now in an enormous change. Like, just to explain how fast it goes, also because sometimes when we talk about evolution and we talk about like changes, can take millions of years. Like, how can these changes happen so quickly? And it's really interesting because it's from natural selection perspective. It's very easy to understand. only, like throughout history, only 40% of males reproduce. Up to 80% of women reproduce. Okay, which means basically, women have always been in control of sex. They select the males because only when 40% of males reproduce. It means also when women see, we need a different type of man, whoop, they can choose a different type of a man based on the whole pool and only selecting 40% of them. Now it's even less. Now it's 30. And in some places it's 20%. Okay, so it means that women can look for the specialized males. For instance, when there are really hard times, when times are really difficult, women will go for the tougher, more masculine, aggressive men because they will, they are the best survivors in that environment. They can take care of their kids and whatnot. As society develops, we need more social intelligence, right? We need empathy. We need to understand each other. It's less competition and more understanding. And then females will choose softer males, right? They will choose males that have more empathy, better parenting skills, better listeners, all of that. And understand that this can happen in a matter of a decade, in a matter of a few years. Women can completely change what males get to reproduce. So we change the gene pool, and this is part of evolution. It's really fascinating, right? Because it's happening, and it's been happening for the last, few decades, really since the Second World War. Women started reproducing with softer males. And it's not only that. When it comes to our epigenetics, we have a lot of switches that we have developed throughout evolution. So for instance, when we need, when survival is tough, males need to be extremely masculine, women need to be very feminine, because that's how one can survive. Like the roles are very clear. We become more binary in the way we think. I said because it's black and white, life and death. So male, female. As we become more complex, when we have society that's starting to function, and we can specialize even more, and we can focus on ourselves, and there is more variety, it means that we open up genetically as well. Women will not only choose softer males, but we will change. Sexuality will be more fluid, and that's in us. We'll have a wider kind of spectrum of what it means to be human, because we're not as black and white anymore. We have more color, so everything in between. And this is what we're seeing now. So when we have an established civilization, when it becomes, how can we survive together? Not fighting the outer enemy, but how can we live? So, and how can we make it work for everyone? Then there will be a bigger, a larger spectrum of different varieties when it comes to how we are human. And this is also what's going on today. This is also why there are so many LGBTQIA+ people. It is increasing because we have these switches saying that, yeah, that's actually smart for survival. Think of when we're quite binary, we have less understanding of each other because we're all pointing in direction, which means we're fighting, right? As long as we're pulling in the same direction, we have a common enemy, we need to achieve the same things, survival. It means we really don't understand each other, but we're doing the same thing. If we then start looking at each other, that will be maximum conflict. So when we then switch, our genetics, it means that, yeah, instead of having black and white, we have all these different, for variation, it means that we develop more tolerance. We become more patient, we become more loving because we realize, all right, it's not black and white. We have all these different ways of being human and everything, seems to be working fine. So basically we kind of fill in the space between the kind of the binary position to make things flow better. And we develop more social intelligence, more empathy. We become more kind of nurturing. And both men and women will become more kind of fluid. We will have very masculine men, very feminine women, but we will also have everything in between. And it's a sign of a civilization that has actually made it. We have a genetic response to it, then starting to fill in the colors. Now, traditionally, what has happened then, because this has happened many times before, whenever that happens, it means that we become less aggressive. And what happens then? Cultures and civilizations that are not on the same level, they are still fighting. They're still more aggressive. They will take over. It's happened every time. You could see it in Egypt, you saw it in Greece, you saw it in Rome. It happens every time. So we're at that point right now. And you can also see that you have what's happening in the West, and then you have other parts of the world, other cultures where they're still more binary because they're still fighting for survival. Right? So for this to work, we will need to reach a more global culture, because otherwise the more primitive cultures will always win. This is how civilizations end. It's the civilization becoming too soft, too inclusive, right? They care too much about each other, and their willingness to fight will drop. But, the enemy will fight, so game over. So the only way this can work is when we have a global civilization. We're not there yet. So the West will be corrected, right? So what we're seeing now is a phase, historically, and it will pass. And then as we build a global civilization, then it will happen again. But from that point on, there will be no kind of outer enemy to take over. So then we will just continue on that path, and we will unfold more and more and more and more of the human potential. So that's where we're heading, but we're not there yet, where we're ready to have like one global culture. There is so much karma that will have to be worked out for first. But what we're seeing now in our part of the world is kind of the prequel. We're just seeing the potential, what can happen with the human potential. Once we have a functioning society, it starts opening up, and we get like all shades, all variations. Again, that's a sign of a successful civilization, but it's also normally the sign that it's coming to an end.
On YouTube, Hogna asks an interesting question. There's a trend also since World War II around the world of kind of the outsourcing and centralization of parenting in the form of universal kindergarten. It's really prominent here in Europe, but I think it's also Japan, China, so it's all over the world. He's wondering, what role has that played in where we are today with this challenge in the young people? And then could you also speak to, are other countries than Europe and the United States and Canada, are they also experiencing this sort of woke, struggling generation?
Right. This is an interesting question, because many people believe that their kids are their personal property. Right? If we accept that every human is free, they belong to a society. They don't only belong to their family. First of all, they belong to the society they live in. Which means that when you have public schools and whatever, it's part of society also educating that child to become a productive member of that society. It's always been that way. But our societies used to be smaller. So it was kind of easier to understand, because where the family ended and society began, it was not as clear because you lived in a group of 20 people. Right? So it could feel like something else is taking over my child. But the reality is, it's not your child. And especially today, where things are moving ahead fast, it is important to also to allow society to educate your kids and to find that balance, right? But I think what many parents have done in our parts of the world is just let kindergarten and school just do their job and I will not be involved. That's not been smart either. I think it's important that parents are extremely involved and often compensate, because remember, what you get in school and kindergarten will just be how the collective relates to your child, which is important and will hopefully assist that child in becoming a productive part of society and not as self-centered. But they're not as invested in developing the talents of the child as hopefully you are. I always advise that parents should kind of compensate for that and to be involved and to educate them and give them access to whatever they need to develop their special skills and talents. So it's not either or. But I think it's important to understand that when we incarnate somewhere, we're actually part of the greater body. We are part of a group. We're part of the collective. We're part of society. And we cannot choose not to be. Because everything we do, everything we interact with is part of this greater fabric. Right? And it's also making our kids competent in dealing with the civilization they're part of. Not just they're living in it, but they're part of it. So, kind of public education is important, because otherwise you will educate your kids into becoming someone that operates kind of on the side of society, will not necessarily be successful. Because, you know, it's so important to remember that when we incarnate somewhere, we choose it. When we incarnate on this planet, it's because we want to be part of it. And we see it as our own journey, and we can become successful in so many different ways. And we need to explore and we need to develop ourselves. And that does not happen by being entitled or wanting to be understood. You're not here to be seen or understood or supported. The world owes you absolutely nothing. And this is part of what we see in this current generation. There seems to be, for many, a big misunderstanding here. You are here to understand. You're here to learn. You're here to grow and to learn how to be productive and how to be part of evolution, how to be part of the transformation and continued growth of this culture and civilization. It owes you nothing. And back to the entitlement that many parents unfortunately have installed in their kids, not because they want to. This is just how we've been treating our kids for a long time, and it has to stop. We need to teach our kids that the world is just like a warehouse of opportunity. The rest is up to you. No one will give you anything. No one owes you anything. It's up to you. And to then teach your kids to go out into the world and slay, to be everything they can be. But in order to do that, they need to understand the rules. The rules are already there. What I often tell parents today is that capitalism is human nature. Therefore, it will not go away. It will take a long time before humans come up with something else. Capitalism is basically an economic hierarchical structure. Humans are extremely hierarchical. Everything we do is based on hierarchy. So when you look at communism, it still turns into hierarchy, and it's still about money. And what you see what's happening in China, it's not communism anymore, it's capitalism, because it's human nature. We cannot change human nature through political policies. This has developed because this is who humans are and how humans are. It's been part of human evolution since humans started trading and, exchanging stuff and figuring out, like, what's the value of this? Do I need that? It's in us, so it will not change. So you cannot have success in life. If you want to have success, you can't change the rules. You have to learn. You have to play by the rules. And then you can change them. You can use them to your own advantage. But protesting and whining has never changed anything. It's never been a solution. I say criticism is not a solution. I talk to a lot of young people and say, if you want to change the world, you need to become a specialist. You need to become an expert in something. Become a scientist. Get rich, because then you have the resources. Become successful, then you have a voice. Right? First, use the rules of the game to your own advantage. Become someone. And then use that position for the greater good. Then you can have an impact. But whining and screaming and yelling and complaining, nobody cares. You're actually part of the problem, not part of the solution.
On YouTube, Paul chimes in that parents today seem to love loose boundaries for their children, but it turns out the mechanism is that they end up being uncertain of themselves because they don't know what the rules of the game are, as you're talking about. And Hogna adds that they also then don't learn how to learn, or they kind of forget that they're here to be a student. So those were very interesting comments. And then Rick, he chimed in that he was wondering about the perspective of the grandparent. He's been a parent and now he's a grandparent, and he's wondering, what are your reflections around the role of the grandparent and what we can do as spiritual grandparents?
Right. Now, the role have always been the same. Parents represent knowledge. Grandparents represent wisdom. So parents are supposed to show the kids how to survive and how to do things, how to be productive. And the grandparents are supposed to mirror, what does it all mean? Because they have journeyed. They've come to a conclusion. I often say, as a grandparent, you've reached the kind of stage where you ferment, right? So you ferment your knowledge, you ferment your experiences, and fermentation means that everything is broken down. So all the nutrients become clear, and they become more universal and more easy to absorb, because you've kind of, you go through a process of maturity and you understand things that you can only understand as you're getting older. So that's the wisdom part. And I think today we have completely lost wisdom. And especially, again, young people believe that they understand everything already. They don't have to learn anything. Everybody should learn from them, right? Because they are right. They have the right values. They understand, and everybody else are wrong. There's no wisdom there, right? when older people when they stand in their flow and their power, they can vibrate kind of beyond all of that screaming. And they can just stand there and they can talk about what life is really about, right? And then be part of installing a value system that actually will bring the young people to a different place in themselves and a different place in the world. The challenge is that most people, when they get older, they don't get wise anymore. And it's because we still consume, we still try to be with it, instead of fermenting, right? Instead of processing, going deeper and getting to know who we are. Many people do this too, but most people don't. Older people, they're probably more stupid now than ever, right? When you go back a few generations, old people, they had more time to sit and think, and they would be able to share something deep. Many older people today, it's just surface. And we need to also to teach older people how to process and how to regain a position of wisdom. Old people listen far too much to young people. Young people should at least listen to the elders. In all cultures, that has been the cycle of things, and it's worked. So, when young people don't have real adult supervision and they think they don't need it and nobody corrects them, it doesn't go as well as it probably could have, right? So again, back to we are in a very strange place in our culture. And a benefit, of course, is that when you are not as influenced by the past, and many young people, they have no idea about what happened before they were born, and they don't care, because life started when they, got born into this world. And part of it is also that many of them know instinctively that they represent something new. Spiritually, they are to bring something in, right? But because of the culture, they become arrogant. And I've seen many people of this kind of new generation also spiritually, they've already lost the plot because they're incarnated into a life form in a culture where they don't learn how to kind of harness their talents, harness their consciousness, and find direction, become productive. So they just feel a lot, and everything is wrong, and everything should be different, and they are aware of this, but they are not necessarily productive with it. So it is important also with these young people not just tell them that you can just be whatever. Recognize that for someone to be able to change the world, they first need to be successful. They first need to master the rules. They need to be productive with them. They need position. They need to get to a place where they have a voice. And then, right? So they need education. They need ambition. They need to be part of this world. Not, stand on the side and say, it should be different. It's not my responsibility. The thing is, it's actually their responsibility because it's their generation. They're the ones who are supposed to make these changes happen. And they can't just how dare you? They have to learn and to educate themselves and become the people that are actually able to make changes for real. And it takes so much more than they think. It also takes wisdom. It takes higher consciousness. Many young people are also aware of this, right? They are spiritually connected and they know what they're doing, but they're not the screamers. They just work quietly because they know they have incarnated to change the world and they're doing their thing. We're talking about are those kids who are kind of trapped in the middle here. And there are a lot of them, right? So many young people have lost their way and they've given up already because, again, they are losers by definition because the mountains are too tall. They can't climb, they can't win. And parents had told them, do whatever. Teach them the rules. Assist them in finding mountains they can actually climb. We all need to feel successful. We all need to become someone. We have it in us. We all have a talent for a specialization that the world needs. It's not always what we want, but we all have talents. Human survival has always been based on collaboration between specialized humans. It's just very difficult today because in the old days, right, if you were born like the son of a warrior, you would be a warrior. Right? If you were the daughter of, someone who could weave or something, you would do that. So we expect in a way to find our path, and we inside of us we expect it to be there, but it's not anymore. But we're born with talents and opportunities and consciousness, so we can today explore. Remember that we are to fill in the gaps, add more colors. So it's a different process. We need to connect within. We need to connect with our consciousness. And as parents, we need to help the young people find direction. But it doesn't just happen, right? Remember also when you have kids who've never been on this planet before, they have no idea how to operate this thing, right? It can be very confusing. You need to show them how to be a decent human being and how to be productive, how to be part of the world. You cannot change the world unless you're a part of it. And this is what we see with many young people. They have a lot of opinions, right? They feel a lot, but they're not part of it. Right? So as parents, we need to be more disciplined in how we approach our job as parents. We need to be more disciplined. We need to assist our kids in creating kind of a funnel of success. And we have been way off for the last couple of generations. It will correct itself. And you also see today many young people are seeking more discipline. I've talked about before, this is why many young men, they seek, the likes of Andrew Tate and people like that. And it's not necessarily a positive thing, but it's not necessarily negative either. It's just an interesting phenomenon. It's the lack of that disciplined masculine guidance that parents were supposed to give, and instead we have fun daddy, just like you have adult males behaving like they're still a college kid, right, and being friends with their kids, and they need masculine guidance, right? So it's also for us as parents, grow the fuck up. Be adults. Be old. Don't try to be cool. Don't try to be friends with your kids. Set the rules. Show yourself as a competent human being. Be disciplined. Be successful. Create that mold, right? Set the example. You can't expect your kids to learn from you if there's nothing to learn. Remember, how to be human? That's your job. Your kids will emulate and copy what they see, right? And when they have a dad that's just still behaving like a teenager, they will seek and retake, right? Because they feel there's something missing here. Kids today need more guidance than a generation ago because the world is more confusing. Be stricter, have more direction. I've guided so many parents in also taking control over the kids' education, not just letting their kids take any education, but for the parents to understand how can you become successful in the world. Remember that the world is getting more brutal. It's getting tougher. And in a generation from now, we will see a lot more poverty. It will be tougher. And it's your job to also make sure that your kids become winners, right? So we need to kind of tighten how we operate as parents and to become more skill-oriented, develop the talents of our kids, also develop the kind of human talents, and not just expect kids to figure it out on their own. Which also means that, yes, we as parents, we have to keep ourselves informed. We can't just like let the young people figure it out. It's not smart. We have to be better than that. So be involved, right? And be an adult and provide guidance. Any more questions?
Yes, on YouTube, Chan actually points to a really interesting trend that was in parallel. The 60s were probably the big explosion of the use of narcotics and psychedelics, and especially among young people. But to my knowledge, I think that trend has both continued and increased over time, especially in the wealthier, developed countries. And he's wondering, what role has recreational drugs and that sort of distraction played in how things have developed, and what role will it play going forward?
Yeah, recreational drugs have had a lot of, I would say, positive impact on the world. In the way that, remember that after the Second World War, we became very obsessed with production. Machines and production and building, and it was necessary, but we also needed to break free from that, and that also happened in the 60s, as you all know. So that also enabled people to connect with themselves in new ways, beyond religion, beyond dogma, and just experience stuff, right? Not all of it was productive, but when you look at it from a more systemic perspective, it was positive in the way that it did something to people's brains. They were able to experience themselves differently, and that as a kind of pocket of the collective human consciousness, that was a positive impact. Now, when you look at it from an individual level, it's one thing to try substances to open up, and all of that is different when you develop an addiction, right? As I've talked about, most people today, they have so many addictions. They self-medicate in so many different ways. Not just with drugs, it's like food, entertainment, this or that, shopping, depression. You know, we have so many different ways to self-medicate simply because being human today is very complicated, and instead of doing the job, many people just prefer to self-medicate, and then they teach their kids to do the same thing. I understand it, because being human today is very complex, very difficult, and it's way past, you know, the level where our genetics can instruct us what to do, right? And we just expect life should work, I should work, and then it doesn't. And it's very painful. But this is also why we need to learn, we need to grow up. We need to take responsibility for our own existence and educate ourselves. We need to work on our pains. We need to look at our discrepancies when it comes to like our skill set and who we are as a person of white arts, and we can do something about it. It's a job. We incarnate here because it's a workplace. We're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to heal. And you can learn how to do that. This is why spiritual growth work is so important. It's available. We all need to work on ourselves continuously, because what we have in us genetically is simply not enough anymore. And if you don't, there's only self-medication left. And then taking drugs is just part of it, and I completely get it, but it's not a good example. I think part of being a responsible adult today is doing some form of growth work. Getting to know yourself, becoming a better version of yourself, because that also sets the example to your kids. For me, a healthy family conversation should also be about what's going on the inside. And for the parents to guide the kids, not just console them like, oh, you feel bad, oh, let's buy you some more stuff. But talk about how to become a competent human being. Right? That is the parents' job. And when the parents don't have the skill set, they're not really able to guide their kids. But we need to see it as our responsibility to work with ourselves and to gain that insight and to develop our talents and skills and consciousness, and always try to become a better version of ourselves, and then try to set the example and also guide our kids. It's not difficult, but it's the mindset where we believe everything should just work. It should be easy, right? And it's not, so we just protest and then we self-medicate. When we become comfortable with the idea that life is a school, it's a workplace. I'm here to continuously work on my karma, which means always kind of being challenged in who I am and what I believe, always having to make changes, always having to transform and adapt. It's actually quite interesting, it's quite fun. So if you are in some type of growth work, I think you will set a great example for your kids, because this is clearly what a lot of young people are missing today. That's why they are behaving the way they are. They don't have that guidance. And then life is simply too complex for human genetics to understand.
On YouTube, Anna asks a vulnerable kind of personal question. How can I stop being overprotective of my 8-year-old boy? I understand that young boys need to play and test their limits, but it is quite hard to keep a higher perspective and to not act on my fears of what could happen.
Right. I always tell parents that stop protecting your kids. You have to make them robust. You have to make them survive and reach success. And when you protect your kids, it comes from a place of wanting no harm to happen, but harm needs to happen. It's just like when learning how to ride a bike, you have to fall off. You have to injure yourself, and then you learn. You only learn because you injure yourself. So we have to go through pain. We have to go through painful experiences. That's how we learn. When we protect our kids from that, they become incompetent when it comes to dealing with life, because then they expect that nothing bad could ever happen to them. Nothing bad should ever happen, and they will have the expectation that life should just, do everything for them, because that's what they're used to. So traditionally, men have been the ones bringing the kids out into real life as they'll figure it out, and not taking safety too seriously, It's normally been the men that has given knives to kids, not the mothers, right? And it's still like that. Mothers have a tendency to be overprotective, and it's harmful. Because think if you want your kids to ride a bike and you don't want them to experience any harm, you'll not only buy a helmet, you'll buy knee protectors and you buy this and that, and they'll sit there like, and they will believe that that's how life is, and they will believe that nothing bad can happen if they just protect themselves enough. It's not how life is. We need pain. Pain is the great purifier. It's how we connect with transformation and change in ourselves. So understanding that when we protect our kids too much, we are ensuring that they will never be successful, that they will not survive on their own, that they will not be able to climb the mountains of life, because that could be dangerous. We need to embrace danger, because when there's danger, there's also potential. Often those two are combined. In business, one knows this. The greater the risk, the greater the potential reward. If there is no risk, there's nothing. So it is important, especially for women, to not overprotect, but to let their kids go through painful experiences, to injure themselves, because that's how we learn. I can understand that, especially as a female, it can be difficult, but you need to think more than you feel. Because when you overprotect your child, you're doing your child a great disservice.
Bianca is online from the city of the woke in San Francisco. So she wonders how to balance being sensitive to prejudice and inequalities and yet not freeze and be afraid of doing anything wrong. How do we support kids to balance woke?
Right. Now, when we look at the whole woke thing, the good part here is it's really a way of thinking where you recognize that there are differences between people, and that there are kind of systems in place that can also create differences, right? Racism, economic structures, sociological structure, all of that, which is fine. What we need to realize spiritually, that we are not equal. We're not the same. We're all on different journeys. We all have different karma. We're all in different levels of consciousness. We're all in different points of evolution. And even when it comes to karma, we're studying different things, and we're at different levels in our studies. And whatever we experience around us will be the rendering, the mirror image of our exact point of our own journey. There is no way around it. So the expressions will be different for each individual. Their journeys will be different. And we can try to fight karma and say, it should all be the same. It will never happen. It can't happen. Because we are not the same. We are of the same, but our karma is unique to us in our journeys. So, what we need to understand spiritually is, therefore, we need differences. We need injustice. We need conflict. We need different people with different lives, and the concept of fair does not exist. There is nothing fair about life. Because that's the idea, that it should be more equal. Our journeys are not equal. They're not the same. We're here for different reasons. So your journey is unique to you, and then someone else will have a different journey. And it's interesting because there's some people, they struggle their entire life. They work really hard and they try this or that, nothing happens. And then you have, another person hardly does anything and money just flows in. Yeah, that's fair in a way, because it represents the different levels of consciousness, the different karma, the different journeys. We cannot eradicate karma. We incarnate because we want to study our own karma. And we need to mirror ourselves in others and to have all these conflicts and pains so we can get triggered into trying to do something with our own position. Right? And often experiencing someone having something that we don't have, not just from a material point of view, but it could also be characteristics, it could be whatever, that could be painful. And we could then try to achieve that. It can pull us in a direction horizontally. So first, we just need to understand that, because often we will have political ideologies where we create a starting point that we should all have the same and be the same. It will never happen. It never works. It never will. So you have that, and then you have the complexity of, I would say, empathy. And now where we are, where we have many different ways to be human, and that should be celebrated and explored. So I think this is how to balance it, both understanding that we all have unique journeys. We cannot remove karma through politics. We cannot change consciousness through systemic structures around ourselves. It will never happen. It's not how it works. Empathy and celebrating diversity also has to be about understanding that we are in different levels of consciousness. Diversity is also different levels of success, different levels of life skills. And that giving everyone the opportunity to explore themselves and their own journeys and find how they can be productive, how they can, be part of the world in a successful way. But we're all different, right? That is the wonderful thing and the wonderful potential about where we are in our civilization at this point, is that more people can experience that. So there are many qualities to the kind of idea of wokeness, right? But what they don't understand is through their attack on whatever is not equal. And when people have a different value system, that's just a misunderstanding. We need every single variation, every aspect, every color, every shade of every color, so that everyone can have the life journey that is the exact rendering of their level of consciousness and their expansion and their potentials. So I think this is basically how to balance it. You need the spiritual perspective in order to understand both that, yes, we can have empathy, we can be there, we can celebrate diversity, but we're also on very different journeys.
Our colleague IKYA, he makes a really interesting point. When parents are struggling to be parents, how is it that we also arrive at that no one else is allowed to parent our kids? Teachers, other adults, grandparents, they're not supposed to be able to discipline or, guide even too directly. How did we arrive at that in addition to struggling to parenting?
Oh, this is another fun thing, because this is back to genetics. Now, how evolution works is that when a life form will arrive at the conclusion that I need to adapt, right? Something has happened in the environment, And our current programmings and behaviors will not do it anymore. We have to change. Then there will be stress, and through that mutation, and there will be all sorts of variations so that one can then test out which strategy will actually work, right? And that often happens, and often always happens, through many, many generations. You can see when you kind of watch evolution, you can see the signs, that it can take millions of years for a life form to transition from one form to another one, right? So when it comes to how life experiments, it's important to keep the different strategies separate. Okay? So just try to follow my thought here. When you have a family, you have a kind of genetic bloodline, which means bloodline is basically genetic programmings, right? You will develop a culture within the family. This is how we do it. This is how we survive. This is how we think. This is how we do it. And from the collective human, it's all an experiment. Like, who are better suited to survive in this environment? So you're supposed to, in a way, from a genetic point of view, keep your kids pure so that they can be part of that very specialized culture that you represent. So that your genes and the kind of culture unfolded through that set of genetic programmings can then become kind of specialized in behavior and thought and all of that. And then that will fight everybody else, and over time one will see what will work. So this is where it's coming from. But today, it's much more complex because we are unfolding and developing faster. Just as we talked about, the type of men that women select have drastically changed over a few generations, meaning that we are different now, right? Where are the real men and the real women, right? Gone, for the most part. And it's through natural selection. It's happened so quickly. So, how we develop today as a life form is by mixing and really kind of blending ourselves together. It's also how we will reach the global consciousness more quickly, right? Because when we look at it, all cultures, all races, all of that's mixing, and it's basically, just like kneading a dough, and you have different ingredients, you just like have to keep mixing, and we're in the beginning of that. So now we're still kind of kneading the dough, and everything's still separate. It's not blended together yet. So we can feel that, right, we're still different cultures, different races, different all of that, and we're mixing, and over time we will blend together. It will then help also the different cultures, the different kind of types of vibration and genetics on this planet to become more in harmony with each other. It's not that we will all be the same. It's the opposite, that we'll have even more variations and combinations and uniqueness, right? I often talk about what's happened in the food culture, and it's that. Everything blending together means that we will have even more options, even more fun, even more kind of new flavors by mixing this ingredient from that culture with that ingredient from that culture and yet another thing from that culture combined into becoming something absolutely delicious and wonderful, just like you, right? And it's that. It's seeing that this is where we are heading. This is what's happening. It's happening slowly. But over time, evolution is now forcing us to mix because this is where we're at on the planet. So we already have in us the genetic kind of switches for this type of behavior. As consciousness is expanding and more and more beings with more of a kind of global collective mindset are incarnating, right? So this is also a natural behavior when you look at it from the theory of evolution. So we're seeing vast kind of changes going from like separate cultures and ethnicities and now starting to exchange and mix and match, and we create something new. Because survival, the rules of survival have changed. It's more and more collaboration and understanding and empathy and all of that. It's less competition. And we're seeing that, yeah, aggression is not really, it's also on the level where we can, now with the current conflict, potentially becoming a new world war, it's not productive, right? Should we just let these, men with very small penises decide the fate of the entire planet? What? Are we still doing that? It's one thing when you have two tribes, right? And you have like two, chiefs with a little bit, again, too much of the same thing. But if they all kill each other, it doesn't matter. Because it's few people now, everything is becoming global. So we have to grow out of these old type of behaviors. And the only way we can get there is if we mix to the level where, like, who are we going to fight? Right? Because all of us are in the same room. Wherever you go, you have every culture, every type of skin color and genetic makeup, like all of that, and we're all friends. Who are we going to fight? Right? And that's also part of it. For the human life form to survive, we need that to happen. So we become one big we. It's just us on this planet together. And this is what a lot of young people, they get this. It's in them. It's just in a very immature state yet. Right? But you can see the potential there. Because we are moving in that direction. And spiritually, it's also important in your spiritual work, try to challenge yourself with how you identify with certain cultures or ethnicities, and how we then look at other people or other cultures like, oh, we're the best. No, we're not. This is a very small planet in a huge galaxy, and then there are trillions of other galaxies. It's just, a very small planet. So we just need to figure it out. We need to grow beyond all of this. We are us, right? And when we talk about being a spiritual service, which is basically loving, understanding, nurturing, supporting everyone, how can we then still identify with a certain group and then criticize others who do not belong to that group, right? It's too primitive. So if you want to be part of lifting the planet, you have to identify with the planet. You have to see the great we, the great us, and treat everyone from that perspective and that love. Not limited to humans, but everyone. And this, I think, also is what we need to teach young people. They have it in them. But as adults, we should have that awareness, right? And we should vibrate this and show it to them. And it means we have to talk from this perspective. We have to show it. And at the same time, respect that we're all in different karmic journeys. But just as when it's figured out genetically, there are more kind of variations often in a certain set of ethnicities than there are between that set of kind of ethnic DNA and another group, which means like, as one knows, the whole construct of races and all of that is just bullshit. Because in whatever group culture, you will find the same variations in different ways. We are so similar. And we have to go beyond these stories we have about how kind of different we are. We are different in the way that we are all unique. So we need to learn to see each individual, each journey, not based on tribe, not based on group, not based on DNA, ethnicity, culture, but individual. And beyond that, there's just the big we. So I think also, you know, people in spiritual communities, I've met so many people who consider themselves to be spiritual and they're deeply racist. What? We're still there. And to me, it's so funny, right? Want to be in spiritual service, and you're still a racist, right? But, you know, that's human logic for you. But to me, when we are in spiritual work, we have to look at our own attitudes for real and see, what are we saying, what are we showing, what are we practicing in the real world? And many people in the spiritual communities, it would be smart to look at our own attitudes and ways of thinking and say, are we actually displaying a higher consciousness? Right? Or are we still in ways of thinking and behaviors that belong to a more primitive level? Because if that's the case, well, that's where we belong. That's what we have to work on ourselves continuously. Because to me, that is also what we need to show young people, right? That we are here to learn and to grow, and it never ends. We always learn, we always figure things out, we always become better. And I think especially when we are on a spiritual path, we should set the example. We should always live in a way that provides guidance. Not us necessarily having to say anything, but that how we live our lives. Set the example in such a way that people get it. Because that's the proof of the pudding always. Your beliefs still matter, right? What you think and like how spiritual you are. Is your life an example that points forward, right? Can other people look to how you conduct yourself for guidance, right? And I think when it comes to young people, as a culture, we have forgotten that. But even a lot of people in spiritual work have forgotten this. We need to live and conduct ourselves in such a way that we can kind of take scrutiny from young people. They have to see that we're kind of standing and that we have a backbone and that we have values, that we're doing the work and that we're living and that we're growing and healing continuously. I think this is also why so many young people are stressed, because they look to see if they can find adults and they can't find any. A lot of the adults they see right through them because they're just full of it. Of course they scream and yell because, like, you know, who can they relate to? So if you are in spiritual work, you have an extraordinary responsibility to be that person. Always be the adult in the room. Always set the example. Young people crave it. They truly want guidance because many, they understand that they have incarnated to achieve something great. but they're not able to unlock it and find their path and figure out how to be productive without the guidance of individuals of consciousness and integrity. This is also why, is like when we are in spiritual work, we need to be part of the world. We need to carry the light. We need to show direction. We need to show everyone how it's done. Because most people are confused and they feel lost and they're drowning themselves in different self-medication strategies. We are the leaders. We're supposed to be the leaders. We're supposed to lead and set the example. I always say that ethics only matters when nobody's watching. And this is what I mean by like carry yourself and live your life in the way, which means it can be dissected. People can see to you and they can see through you, and it will have to be solid, substantial, and true. Many young people, they have incarnated with a consciousness where they're able to see through bullshit because they have to figure out how to do things in a much better way. If you have no spiritual integrity, they will not listen. But work on yourself to be someone that people can look to, not just kids, but also adults. In many ways, it's more important than just sitting down and meditating. We need to do that too, but we also need to be present. People everywhere need guidance, and where are you? It's not about what you say, it's about how you live. It's about the example you set. So if you can be that person, then you can impact young people. Then it can assist them so they can find their path, because it's their journey. They have to figure it out. But then you carry knowledge and wisdom. And then you can be that contact point to that individual they meet that changes everything. Right? Many people have stories about that one adult they met that changed everything. That should be you. It's a job. It's part of being in service. People need you to be clear. They need you to be present, grounded, loving, to be connected spiritually, to operate from a higher consciousness. The world needs you to do that. So get your shit together. Be an adult. And show yourself as a spiritual being, walking on a spiritual path, so that you are the one who changes everything.
I'm smiling thinking of those individuals in my life who have played that role and been those adults. Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us tonight for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, where we really truly seek to bring you practical spiritual advice for your everyday life by, again, like we did tonight, unpacking important topics of the day and looking at the spiritual principles playing out and going deeper and trying to understand how we might, as we've talked about tonight, be lights in the world. So be sure to join us again next Monday at 7 o'clock or 19 o'clock Oslo time for IKYA Live again. And be sure to like and share tonight's episode with anyone who might benefit. And trust me, you all know lots of parents, and we are also parental figures to young people and even our friends and family, all the time. So this is a really important episode tonight. Please share as widely as you can. And also be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to our social media, IKYA.official on all the channels. And until next time, thank you again for joining us for IKYA Live.